Okay, so we've got a few little bits on the go. They're very straightforward. First of all, we've got the main weapons bay, the underneath one, two sides, the middle, two little vanes at the top of those. Extremely straightforward. Makes a nice strong piece. Next, we've got the main wheel well, which is obviously just the two side parts in the front. Now, at this point, you can insert the undercarriage to it, and that's where this bit comes along, which is what we're using is the Scale Aircraft Conversions landing gear. Trouble is, I've got some stills of these as well that you'll be able to see, but we've got them here. And I hate to be one of these sort of, you know, doubting Thomases and that, but all they've done is cast the original piece. If you can get you in camera, they've cast the original piece because unfortunately they even haven't really taken out the ejector pin marks. And the ejector pin marks, you can still see them on the white metal piece where they've copied exactly the other one. You know, and these parts aren't exactly cheap. And I also have to really say that the quality of them isn't that good either. Now, this may be that I've got a bad one, and in which case, you know, I can stand to be corrected and all the rest of it. But quite frankly, paying £15 for something that is exactly the same as what's just come out of the kit does seem a little bit expensive. And also the thing is, they're not exactly smooth and nice either. You know, they're pretty grainy and gritty, and they're not any thinner. They are exact copies. Normally what happens is perhaps they'll use them as a template and redo them and perhaps add some hoses and some brake lines and things like that. But to be honest, these are an exact rip-off of the original one. And the sad thing about it, even during the cleanup process, we've still got centre seams running down the white metal part as that are actually on the original as well, so they haven't even been removed. So if you want to save yourself £15, you know, about sort of $25, don't bother buying them for the Raptor. Now, I can't say this for any other one whatsoever. I'm just telling you how it is. You know me, say it as it is, so to speak, shoot from the hip. But these ones are exact copies of the original part, so in all honesty, you might as well save yourself some money and stick with the original kit ones, because there is no difference, unfortunately. So there we go. What you can actually do, you can fit these directly on to the kit part itself. Now, to do that, it's pretty straightforward. They're just going to clip in, and something along the lines of, we can push him through, not wanting to fit. There we go. They fit in there, just like that, and does the gear. Now, the nice thing about this is that we'll be able to add these afterwards, so don't go gluing these in. What you can actually do, you can put the wheelbase together, and we will fit them after it's all done. So obviously we don't have the trouble of, if I can get these to line up, would help. Wrong way around. If things don't line up, there's usually a good reason for it, as shown there. Yeah, so we can put them afterwards, which means we can close up the main gear doors for spraying and things like that. So we're just going to come in here with a bit of extra thin, that one, and the other side, bit of a squeeze, coating your fingers like that. So we'll let those bits set, and there we go. So that's the main bay, the wheels. Also what we've got out is the side missile launchers. Bays, I should say. The other thing as well we've got here is the intakes. They're quite nice because the seam isn't in a place you're going to see, it's along the top. So all we've done is a little bit of extra thin and just painted it down the groove for the two halves as they go together, which is quite a nice thing. And then you've got your fan blade at the back. So what we'll do with this, we will spray all these parts separately with white, so we can get in there, we can give them a wash and some dry brushing to bring them all to life when they're all totally dry, and then we'll go ahead and install them. Okay, the great thing about doing modern aircraft is that a lot of the parts on them are sort of sub-assemblies. So what I've done, I've moved on a little bit. What we've got, main weapons bay, which is done, obviously centerpiece, we were just doing those. Okay, weapons bays are out and cleaned up, they're done. Obviously we've got the gear bay done, is all glued in position, ready to go. Both the air intakes, dead simple, side to sides, and there you go. Now, if you're going to use FOD covers, you won't have to worry about it. If not, there's two little ejector pin marks, one just down in the front here, and there's two near the rear. You're probably not going to see the rear. I've literally just sanded those off, you know, but I probably am going to have FOD guards in there, some pieces of foam that will paint up, and a bit of PVA glue, and to use those like that. Same thing with the actual, this is the rear engine nozzle set. Obviously it's just two halves stuck together, backing plate on, very straightforward. And in this one, all I've used is a little bit of cellulose thinners or lacquer thinners, just rubbed it round and melted in the lines in there that you've probably seen on other videos. I do the F16 one in particular. So that was just done the same way. Undercarriage, main gear, same thing, those together. And then all we've got down here, these are the engine nozzles at the back. We've just put all those together, really just to save a bit of time, get them all doing as we go like that. So that's those done as well. So what we need now is to spray up the white. Now we need to do it from the inside as well, because there is a slight overlap in here. And this is how the main gear one goes in. And obviously you've got inner parts, this might be around my help. We have these inner parts in there which are going to have to go in. So what we need to do is spray white from the inside, so obviously it's out, and then we can do these, and then we can bring them together, give it another spray of white just to take care of any little lines and little joins in there. Now spraying white is notoriously hard. The way I tend to do it, high air pressure, pretty thick paint, or almost neat paint, certainly for the first pass of it. So what we do, we spray up these little areas, and if I show you how we go about it, first thing we do, we get the compressor on and get the pressure right up. So at the moment we're at about sort of 25, 27 psi. Okay, we've got here Tamiya XF2, which is the flat white, and to be honest, it has got a little bit of Valero 001 white mixed in with it. You can mix the paints quite safely, it's just that I'm running out of this and mixing them together. My preferred one for spraying white is the Tamiya flat white. Then afterwards, if you needed a gloss finish or a satin, you could certainly go around and add to it. So what we're going to do, pop all this neat from the colour cup straight in here like that. Check our spray, it's coming out okay. Then we're going to do the inside. We won't need the spray booth for this because there's not too much of it. So all we do, light dusty over the area first. As I say, it's neat, no thinners, but it probably would be the equivalent of having a couple of drops of thinners. So all we do, we make a light pass first, in some ways just to sort of prime it. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll come back afterwards and build up for the next coat, and so forth and so on. So that's that one done, and then what we'll do, just at the same time, just do this gear well as well. Just like that, pop that to one side. We might as well do the top in the wheel wells here. We've got the top of the undercarriage phase, those can be done. Let's take care of those. And as you can see, it's quite speckly all round, and that's because it's having a hard time spraying this paint. But there we go. And then what we'll do is we'll just do all these bays. So as I say, start with a primer. Way of spraying, just light, don't worry about covering it and building it up too much, because we're not worried about that. So just something like that. Okay, and we can just move on. And then what we do, by the time hopefully you've finished them all up, you come back, it will almost be dry, and because you're spraying neat paint, it's very thick and dries very, very quickly. So just carry our way around all of these. Just remember it's coming from both sides, and so you don't get any shadowing at all. Now at the same time as doing this, obviously you could do all your undercarriage or any other bits and pieces that need to be sprayed white. We'll just do the back of the fans here. You're not going to see this on my particular one, but if you are, then I'll show you at the same time. And then obviously down inside the air intakes as well. As I say, there's lots of different ways of doing the air intakes. If you haven't seen it already, have a look at my other ones, like doing the F15 and F16s, and you'll see how I dip them and physically dip the intakes. This is a quicker way of just spraying it, and then you can come back with a gloss coat to give them a glossy, plasticky finish inside, and all different effects. There's lots of different ways of doing this, but with this one is really the speed one, because I'm not going to be using these parts so much. So what we can do now, we can go back to where we started. Bit of a thicker coat. just in there like that. There we go, that's that one. Okay, we'll do the top. Doesn't need much on there. Okay, back to the bays. And really we're just working our way around them all. And this way I'll probably get away with doing it in 2 coats, but you might need a third. Decent spray. So I'll just finish off these white areas. Okay, so we've moved on a little bit. One thing to point out first, when you glue in the main weapons bay, the bottom one, make sure you put it in first, unlike me who did the side ones first, and then obviously it won't fit. So I had to cut these out and make a bit of a mess to get them back out and in, but then again, we're only human. That'll teach me for not looking at the instructions. Okay, bits we've done. Top of the nose wheel has gone in, cover as well, which is a plate, just goes in the top. Obviously main gear is in for the underneath. Open up your wing holes, quite important if you're going to have your drop tanks on. If you're not, don't worry about it. And then what we've done, we've put the clear glass parts, which are obviously for the navigation and formation lights, they're in already. Thing to remember down here on the top of this fuel tank, there's 2 small little ejector pin marks, which need to be either sanded out or filled to make it, because obviously it is the bottom of the air intake. So when these go in, they're going to slip in quite nicely, just like so, and then hopefully it will make not too bad of a join here, but we are going to sand and fill that no matter what, because we want it to be a lovely little smooth finish on the outside of the model altogether. So once we've got those set in and painted up, we can get the fan cover in the back, and then we can mask them up a little bit in there to stop any sort of, when we do the grey colour in there, to keep all that nice and fresh, and then we can sand and, as I say, fill on that area. So that's the underside basically taken care of. For the top half, really what we've done, we've put in the refuelling door, the air-to-air refuelling door just goes in. I had to sand it down just a little bit on the inside. I used a wider sanding stick, just sanded it down because it seemed a little bit shallow, so it was easier to sand that down than it would be to do the pegs on the inside. So anyway, that makes a nice fit. One of those things, might be nice to scratch build a little bit of that for a bit of detail and have it opened up, but say reference photos of it are a bit sort of, you can't really see it really much at the moment. Navigation lights, same for the top half, so once they're done we're okay. The other thing as well, we've just done silver, it's still wet so I can't touch it, but this is the engine section, as I say, 2 halves, it's dead easy to go together. It's the great thing with this model, it just literally falls together. It's pretty good, I haven't found any faults with it anywhere at the moment. But once these are done, this will come in here and they will just go in like that, okay. And then what we can do, we can fit the cockpit, which we know is just a drop-in fit, into there. We'll mask it up to protect it a little bit, so it doesn't get damaged or anything else like that. And then what we can do, we can then sandwich these 2 halves together, but we'll go through that in a moment. Okay, so we've got the parts in, intakes in, rears are in, everything else. Now we've just got this little seam running down the bottom of this intake. So what we've actually done, we've got our thinned Mr. Surfacer, which is, as you might have seen in the other one, is basically just squadron green putty thinned with cellulose thinners, or lacquer thinners as it's known as elsewhere, into a pot, watered it down till it sort of comes to a gloopy consistency like this. As you say, it's pretty runny. Then all I do is load it up on a cotton stick, cotton bud like this, Q-tip, and just poke it in and wipe it in. Let it dry for about an hour, and then we do what we're doing at the moment, and we're just finishing off. We've got some lacquer thinners in here, plenty of cotton buds because you don't use too much. Soak the entire thing. Then all we do is work it in, and what this will do is melt the paint that's in there. It will melt the actual just do that. It will melt the actual the thinner that we made up, the filler that we've made up as well. That will melt, and the plastic will melt, and then it all melts together to make into a real gooey mess inside. Now the secret of this is to keep it moving. As soon as it starts to dry and starts to get a bit draggy, as in your cotton bud gets stuck, you leave scrape marks and things like that. So it's best to literally flood the cotton bud, okay, and then you just run it all in there and just keep it all moving and keep it all nice and wet. Then what you can do, if you take an oldish brush that you've got floating around, into the cellulose thinners, just like so. It's also something to catch it with. Just got got nothing down here, then all you do is just paint the inside with your soap, and that will just fill in and take up any little gaps and horrible bits, lumpy bits, and it should just take care of all the joins down there. Now it's going to be quite a mess. If we just do this side as well, it will be still a bit of a mess to start with, but what it will do, it will dry, level, and then what we can do, we can hand paint in there then some, here we go, just like that, some actual clear gloss, and it will just take up and smooth it out, and that makes you perfectly seamless intakes. And it's a trick that I've been doing a long time now, using cellulose thinners to do this, and I find it does work very, very well. The only drawback to it that it can be is that if you've got some like pattern detail, riveting or lining in there, it will probably obliterate anything it touches, because obviously what it's doing, it's melting the plastic. But it's a quick and easy way, and you think those intakes took, you know, to do that only took about 5 minutes. If you were sanding and filling and sanding and filling, it'll take a long time and you end up destroying them. It's the same way as that I did the actual burner cans here at the back. Just whip it in there, put it all around, and away you go. But it does help to have a little bit of thinner, a bit of filler in there as well, because it just helps to fill up any gaps and holes that you might have in there. So we just let that dry off, and then we can just pop in there and give it a rub round as is needed, with a sponge or something in there, just to take off any little edges, and then as I say, we can gloss them, let the gloss dry, and then we can spray them white in there, and then we can put the back part on and get the two halves together. Okay, so as you can see, we've got those filled up very nicely. By just doing that, really just keep wiping it around until you're happy with it. Then all I've done is with the brush, some semi-gloss grey paint in there, just to make sure it's all nice and smooth, and also it'll give the next thing, what we'll do is spray it white, something to cling to a little bit better. We've gone around and checked all our joints, so what we can do is just respray these weapon bays up again with some white, get some white in there, and then we might need to come back and have another go at it. But what we've got, the compressor's obviously on now. This is my usual way of spraying white. It's obviously a very high air pressure, as high as I can get it, and then neat white paint in your colour cut. Okay, we check our flow, happy with that, and then we just dust in these weapon bays. Some white in there, just to pretty them up again, because they're getting filthy and chipped and scuffed a little bit, so we want to do those. So that's those taken care of. Then all we're going to do is try lightly airbrush this up the intakes, which takes a bit of a thing. You don't want to stay around too often. Now the thing is, when you're spraying neat paint, you might notice on there in the prongs got a little bit of build up of white. So all we do, we just pinch clean the end just to get rid of that, because the thing is, if you do get a build up, you get spits, and when you get spits, especially in an intake, they look a right mess. So that's why we do that. So just blow in these. And to say, if you haven't done it grey first, it'll be quite a nightmare for this paint to stick to. So what we'll do that, we'll do around these front edges, and we'll come in from the other way. As best we can. And then what we'll do is we'll get down there and spray it, or brush, whichever looks better, with some Johnson's Clear or Clear Gloss to give it that nice intake look. Flow. It's having a bit of trouble getting this out because it is very, very thick. Here we go. There we go, you can just hear that cutting out. So if we show you what we got, there we go, there's your intakes, all nicely done, nice and white and pretty much seamless. And then what we can do in a moment, when that's dried on, we've obviously got the backing plates for the compressor blades, that will stick straight on the back, and then we're done and we can close this up. The other thing is done, we put some silver paint just down onto those clear plastic parts on there, which I presume are sort of navigation lights, things like that, but when you see all the photos, they look like a nice sparkly silver. So that's why we've done it just like that. So that really is our last bit now. We can actually close this up. We've painted up all this area around the back. We're all happy with how those bits are. We're happy with the intake and all things like that. So once we've got that glued in, when those bits are dried off, we can come along and bring both halves together just like that, and away we go. Okay, so we're saying really this one goes together fairly quickly with no real major problems. Now obviously I've done a little bit of dry fitting. Two things I found is I had to take a little bit just underneath the resin cockpit, but to be honest that is so thick underneath there you could just hack it off and away you go. Now obviously was a little bit concerned about it being a tail sitter and things like that, but certainly with the resin cockpit you've got no problem with that at all. It's very heavy up front, even though we've got the tails and the bits and pieces still to go on. Now the one thing I did have a tiny little bit happen, a little bit of cracking in the air intakes. Basically I think that is that I didn't allow enough time between obviously the lacquer thinners going in there and then painting it white, and obviously there's a little bit of separation, it caused a little bit of cracking. So all I did was get in there and give it a spray and another coat, and that's taken care of that. But if you do get any cracking where your white suddenly cracks apart, that's what it is. If you give it a couple of days to totally dry, it'll take care of that. Another way you can do it is just give it a squirt with a little bit of Future in there, and that will neutralise any differences and spreading between the two and should take care of that. So alright, now we can get on with getting these two halves together. Tested it out, all goes together fine, but what I did find was this intake here on this side, the port side one, I had to sand it back just a little bit so it marries up with this lip in here, because obviously it drops in behind this lip on this, well this side as it'll be, so I had to just literally just scrape a little bit back, just sand it down a bit, test it, do it a little bit at a time to get a nice joint. Now there's two ways of doing this. You can either tack it with a little bit of super glue for a quick fix, or you can do it, which is the way I'm going to do it now, which is the longer way, where we'll use a little bit of Tamiya Extra Thin. Now it is a big area to go right the way round, so once you're happy it's all gone in okay and that obviously you don't have any problems with the fit, if we flip this over it's easier to do it upside down. If I just start at the back, okay, and you're happy that that all goes together all okay, and it should click down just like that one, and then literally starting at the rear, we'll do this one back here first for the tail planes, just literally getting there with the Extra Thin, and then what we'll do, we'll just work our way around it basically by clamping and banding as we go. And this one you can literally stick a clamp on it like this, and we'll go around to the other side and do the other one. And what we're going to do it is in sections of 3 probably, or maybe even 4. So if we just get some Extra Thin on the go up here, okay, push that together, happy how it's sitting, a little clamp, okay, and then what we can do these inside ones, which obviously we're going to have to touch in and make sure we've got nice seams because it's quite a focal point. Now I've been quite generous with the Extra Thin because we don't want this to come apart at any point. So literally we're just going to get in there and pretty much flood these areas so we get a nice seal. And we're all happy. So we just leave this rear one to go off and go hard for about half an hour, and then we can get the wings done, both sides of the wings, we'll get those welded up, and then probably this front section, and then last of all we'll do the nose. So we'll probably do it in 4 sections, and that way we can check it. Once it's all gone totally off and it's all hard and there's no give in any of Extra Thin, I'm going to go around and do it again so there's no weak spots. 2 reasons for doing it twice. Firstly, it just makes it a lot stronger, because obviously you don't want it coming apart or any cracks in any of this, and secondly it means because you've got an extra coat, it would have softened it a lot more and made the weld a lot deeper and stronger. So you do sand those edges, you won't get any of that business sometimes where you sand it and you get a little hole in between the joints, and in that way it just makes for a very nice sort of joint. So if we just get that out of the way for the minute, the other bits I've been doing and getting on with at the same time as you can do is that one's starting out is the tails, and obviously we've got the flapper-ons and the bits and pieces. Now obviously we get 2 sets, you can either have up or down, so I'm going to be quite clever with this. We're going to have them as a loose fit and do them so they can be up or down. The other thing as well, when you're doing obviously 2 flat parts, you say we get the thing we're on about in there where it's sometimes you get little cracks up here, little lines in between where it obviously can't sandwich together. The trick is if you get your brush, keep it upside down like this and then do it, and that way it sucks up into it. If you do it down, it might run down the sides and then you get a fingerprint it in there and bits and pieces like that. If we do it this way and we go around that way, it will make it a nice strong weld. We can sand it and then get a sanding stick on here as well, and we can go around and literally polish it all up all nicely, so it's all a very nice finish. But because these are so flat, you need to get rid of all your glue marks as well, so that's where you might want to come in with a finer sanding stick, something like this, just to polish it up. Or certainly if you've got a very nice sort of finish of a sponge, you can literally go over it just to polish it up, because these glue marks will probably show through because it's on such a flat piece. Same with all the other bits, we've just cleaned them all up, so we can get all those done. And if you haven't done them already, whilst that's all drying, obviously you can get on with these nozzles and do those bits. Okay, well I spent a little bit more time than originally I thought on this because I want these intakes to be really nice. As you can see, there's plenty of filler going on here, just the little layers of it, letting it dry overnight and then come back and just smoothing around. Same way as I've done the intakes as well. It probably looks a lot more complicated than it really is. It's literally just a mixture of the Vallejo putty, which dries quite quick, nice small areas, dropping it in, smoothing it in, let it dry totally, come back, sand it out. Now I cut a sanding stick, just took a chunk out of one, so it's just easier to get into those intakes, just to do this area here and take them up. The reason I spent a bit of time on it is, one is it's a real complex area and it's always nice and smooth, and whether you see it, you know, it's quite important to try and get it right. Secondly, it's going to be one of those things everybody's going to look for. Everybody knows that intakes are notoriously a bit tricky to do and things like that, so really spending a bit of time on there and getting that all right and all smoothed in, you know, it will be well worth it, but just for people having a look at it. Basically what we're going to do, we'll do our usual way, we'll give it a coat of some paint. So what we'll do, we'll just grab something like, what have we got? A little bit of grey, dark grey, XF24, just because I seem to have quite a bit of this one. And then all we're going to do, we just grab a brush, an oldish brush, get it on there, just like this, and all we're going to do is just going to paint up these intakes just to see what they're like. Try not to get too much obviously in the inside, and then what we'll do, we just pop some in here as well, and then we'll backtrack to see. But what we're actually doing, we can see how nice the join is and what it's like, and then if we just do the same here, and then obviously, you know, as I said before, it acts as a bit of a filler. So we just put some on there. And the other areas, so anywhere you've got real concern about a join, so obviously I want to make sure we're all okay running down this sides. So we're going to put a generous amount down the sides of the nose, so we can have a look, see what it looks like there. Don't forget, we're going to sand all this off afterwards anyway, so don't worry about it too much. It's just having a strong contrasting colour will just give us a bit of easier to see if there's any gaps and things. So we're just going to do these edges in here, just to make sure they're all full and they're okay. We'll just do the other bit of the intake just down here, but straight away with the brush you can see it's pretty much smooth. Don't have to worry about things too much down in that area. So we'll just let those bits dry off. Being of that type of grey, it won't take long at all. Then we can come back, re-sand it off. Really happy, if we're all happy with it, we can start getting bits together on it. Now the things like the tails, now they'll just literally push straight in and sit, and we can angle them as is needed, and then you can make your choice on what type of flap, the flapperons back here you want. So we've got this one here which is in for the up position, there's the other one, this is the one for the down, and you can mix the two. Obviously you could have it, you know, you paint both of them up and just slip them in afterwards if you're happy with it, but we're quite happy they're going. The other thing we're going to do as well with the cockpit area, we're going to use the kit part, because obviously we've got the resin replacement, and we're going to fix the clear canopy onto this and use it as a mask, because obviously we've got then the resin replacement, which is the better one, which will have the smoke glass on it, and then obviously for future builds we can just add to it and keep going like that. So really we can get those bits all on there. When we're all happy with it, what we'll do is we're going to get stuck in with a primer coat absolutely everywhere. And then we're going to mask up the bays and that by using the doors and some blue tacks as we normally do, and we can get that painted, and then the gear and the bits and pieces like that we do as a sub-assembly, a little bit different. But there we go, we're all coming together. It's pretty quick to get to this stage of getting it all together. It just takes a bit of time around with those intakes to make them look nice.